My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stood in my son-in-law's kitchen, holding the wine glass he had just poured for me. The red liquid caught the light from the overhead lamp, and for one long moment, I couldn't breathe. Everyone was laughing in the dining room. My granddaughter Sophie was giggling at something her Uncle Kevin said. The smell of roasted turkey filled the whole house. It should have been a perfect Thanksgiving. But 3 nights before, my daughter had visited me in a dream. And my daughter had been dead for 18 months. Let me go back to the beginning, because none of this will make sense unless you understand who Diane was and how much losing her nearly destroyed me. Diane was 41 years old when she died. She was a middle school art teacher who kept sunflowers on every windowsill, who called me every Sunday morning without fail, who cried at commercials and laughed too loudly at her own jokes. She was the kind of person who remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every small moment that mattered. She was my firstborn, and she had her father's eyes warm brown, the kind that made you feel like the only person in the room. Her husband Greg told me she collapsed in their bathroom on a Tuesday evening in April. Heart failure, the doctors said. Completely unexpected, no prior symptoms. She was 41 years old and healthy, or so we all believed. I sat in that hospital waiting room for 4 hours before a doctor I had never met came out and told me she was gone. I remember the fluorescent lights. I remember the paper cup of coffee someone had pressed into my hands. I remember nothing else from that night. Grief does strange things to a person. For the first 6 months, I functioned on pure routine. I got up, I made coffee, I drove to the grocery store, I came home, I went to sleep. I am a retired nurse, and I had spent 30 years watching people carry loss, and I still had not the faintest idea how to carry my own. My younger sister Patricia came to stay with me for 2 weeks after the funeral, and her presence helped more than I can say. Kevin, my son, called every evening. He lived 4 hours away in Columbus and had a toddler at home, so he couldn't visit often, but his voice on the phone kept me tethered. Greg kept his distance, which I understood at the time. He was grieving too. He had Sophie to raise, and Sophie was only 7 when her mother died. I told myself that Greg was doing his best. I brought casseroles to their house on Saturday afternoons. I took Sophie to the park. I tried to be present in the way Diane would have wanted me to be. What I did not do, and what I will regret for the rest of my life, was ask questions. The dream came on a Wednesday night, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I had fallen asleep early, which was unusual for me. I am normally a light sleeper, the kind who wakes at every sound. But that night I was deep under before 9 o'clock. In the dream, I was standing in my own backyard, the one I have had for 22 years, with the big oak tree in the corner and the garden bed along the fence where I grow tomatoes every summer. The sky was the strange, bruised color that comes just before a storm, and Diane was standing under the oak tree, wearing the blue cardigan she loved, the one with the small wooden buttons. She looked exactly as she had in life. Not ghostly, not translucent, just Diane, standing there with her arms crossed, the way she always stood when she had something serious to say. I called her name and she walked toward me. She took both of my hands in hers, and they were warm. I remember that clearly they were warm. She said, "Mom, don't drink the wine Greg pours you at Thanksgiving." I started to ask her what she meant, and she squeezed my hands tighter and said it again, more quietly this time. "Don't drink it, Mom, please. And look in the cabinet under the bathroom sink, the one he keeps locked." Then she stepped back. She was smiling, but her eyes were sad in the way they got when she was trying not to cry. She said, "I love you, Mom. Tell Sophie I said the sunflowers will come back in the spring." I woke up at 3 in the morning with my heart slamming in my chest. I sat up in the dark and I said her name out loud, once, into the empty room. The dream was already fading at the edges the way dreams do, but those 2 things stayed sharp and clear. Don't drink the wine, and the locked cabinet under the bathroom sink. I want to be honest with you. My first thought was not suspicion. My first thought was that my brain was manufacturing grief into stories, the way brains do. I was a nurse. I believe in science. I do not think the dead send messages. But I also could not stop thinking about it. I have delivered enough bad news in my career to know that instinct is real. The body knows things before the mind catches up. And something in the very center of me had been quietly uneasy about Diane's death since the beginning, something I had pushed down and ignored because the alternative was unthinkable. Heart failure at 41. No prior symptoms. No warning. I pulled out her autopsy report the next morning. I had read it once, in the terrible weeks after she died, and filed it away because I could not bear to look at it again. I read it 3 times that Thursday morning at my kitchen table, with a cup of cold coffee in front of me. The report noted elevated levels of digoxin in her system. At the time, the medical examiner had noted it as consistent with cardiac medication, but Diane was not on any cardiac medication. I had not caught that the first time. I had been too shattered to catch anything. Digoxin. I knew exactly what digoxin was. I had administered it hundreds of times in my nursing career. It is a heart medication, and in the right doses, it is a lifesaver. In the wrong doses, particularly in a person with no tolerance built up, given slowly over time, it can cause fatal arrhythmia. It can cause exactly what the doctors had attributed to Diane's death. It can also be very difficult to detect if you are not specifically looking for it. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the papers down. I told myself I was reaching. I told myself that grief had made me paranoid. But I also picked up the phone and called a toxicologist friend I had worked with years ago at the hospital, a man named Dr. Hargrove. And I described a hypothetical scenario. A healthy woman in her early 40s, elevated digoxin, no prescription. What would he think? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Carol, I'd think someone wanted it to look like natural causes." I sat with that for the rest of the day. Thanksgiving was on Thursday. By Tuesday, I had made 2 decisions. First, I was not going to drink whatever Greg poured me. Second, I was going to find a way to look at that locked cabinet. I arrived at Greg's house at 2 o'clock, the same time I always arrived, with sweet potato pie in a dish and Sophie's favorite cranberry sauce. The house was warm and smelled wonderful. Greg met me at the door in his usual easy way. He was always easy, always charming, with a big open smile and a firm handshake. He had coached Sophie's soccer team and volunteered at the school book fair. Everyone in the neighborhood loved him. My sister Patricia had told me 3 separate times in the past year what a remarkable job he was doing raising Sophie alone. My sister, who had begun stopping by Greg's house long after I thought her visits had ended. I filed that thought away and focused on Sophie, who came barreling down the hallway and threw her arms around my waist. She was 8 now, growing fast, with Diane's same dark hair and her father's height. I held her longer than usual. She did not seem to mind. Kevin and his wife Sarah arrived an hour later with their 2-year-old, and the house filled up with the noise of a real family holiday. Patricia arrived just before 4, and when she hugged Greg hello, she held it a beat longer than a greeting required. I watched, and I catalogued, and I said nothing. Dinner was just after 5. Greg opened a bottle of red wine, and he poured for all the adults, and when he brought my glass around the table to me, he smiled his big, easy smile and said, "Carol, I got this one especially for you. It's the Malbec you liked last Christmas." I thanked him. I set the glass on the table in front of me. I spent the next 40 minutes moving it around, bringing it to my lips without drinking, refilling everyone else's water glasses, and using the motion to quietly switch my glass with the untouched glass near the empty chair at the end of the table. I am a nurse. I know how to be discreet with a glass. Patricia, I noticed, was not drinking wine. She said she was on antibiotics. After dinner, while Kevin and Sarah were managing the toddler and Greg was cutting the pie, I excused myself to use the restroom. Instead of turning right at the top of the stairs toward the guest bathroom, I turned left toward the master bedroom. The master bathroom was unlocked. The cabinet under the sink, a narrow wooden door with a small padlock, was not. I am not proud of what I did next. I went back downstairs, found Greg's key ring on the hook by the garage door where it always hung, and I took it upstairs. It took 4 keys before I found the right one. Inside the cabinet were 3 items. A nearly empty prescription bottle with no label, filled with small white tablets. A sealed plastic bag with a syringe and 2 small amber vials. And a folded piece of paper. I photographed everything on my phone before I touched anything. Then I unfolded the paper. It was a printout of my life insurance policy. The kind that shows the coverage amount and the beneficiary designation. I had taken out this policy 20 years ago, before my husband passed, and I had named Diane as primary beneficiary. After Diane died, I had not updated it. I did not remember who the contingent beneficiary was. Greg's name was printed at the top of the beneficiary section. Contingent beneficiary. $1.2 million. Underneath that paper was a second document. It was a property transfer form for my house, the one I have lived in for 22 years, pre-filled with my name as the grantor and Greg's name as the grantee. Unsigned. Waiting. I stood in that bathroom for what felt like a very long time, though it could only have been 3 or 4 minutes. I was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. I thought about Diane standing under the oak tree in my dream, with her warm hands and her sad eyes. I thought about elevated digoxin in a healthy 41-year-old woman. I thought about Patricia saying she was on antibiotics, not drinking the wine she had drunk without complaint every other holiday for 60 years. Patricia knew. I put the documents back exactly as I had found them. I locked the cabinet, returned the keyring to its hook, and walked back into the dining room, where my son-in-law was serving slices of pecan pie with the same easy smile he always wore. I ate the pie. I hugged Sophie goodnight. I told Greg it was a lovely dinner. I drove home. I did not sleep. The next morning I called Dr. Hargrove again, and this time I was not speaking in hypotheticals. I told him everything, the dream, the cabinet, the unlabeled tablets, the vials. He told me I needed to go to the police, and I needed to do it that day. He also told me something that made the room tilt sideways under my feet. He said that the symptoms of chronic low-dose digoxin poisoning are almost indistinguishable from normal aging in a person over 60. Fatigue, occasional dizziness, nausea, things a woman my age might write off without a second thought. Things that could be quietly escalated over weeks or months until the heart simply gave out. I had been feeling tired for the past 4 months. I had been dizzy twice in September. I had chalked it up to the change of seasons. I went to the police that Friday morning. I brought my phone with the photographs. I brought the autopsy report with the circled digoxin notation. I brought the business card of Dr. Hargrove, who had agreed to speak with investigators. The detective I spoke with, a woman named Detective Reyes, steady and unhurried, listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me to wait. She came back 40 minutes later and said they were opening an investigation. I need to tell you about the conversation I had with my sister, because I think about it often. I called Patricia that afternoon and told her I had gone to the police. I gave her the chance to say something first. There was a very long silence on the line. Then she said, "Carol, I didn't know what he was going to do to you. I swear I didn't know." I asked her what she did know. She started to cry. She told me she had been seeing Greg for 11 months. She told me that Greg had told her Diane's heart condition had been getting worse for a year before she died, and that Diane had begged him not to tell anyone because she didn't want to worry her family. She told me she had believed him. She said she wanted to believe him because it was easier than the truth. I asked her if she thought he had loved Diane. She said she didn't know anymore. I told her she needed to speak with Detective Reyes. Then I hung up. The investigation moved faster than I expected. The unlabeled tablets in Greg's cabinet were identified as digoxin. The vials contained a digoxin solution in a concentration consistent with what had been found in Diane's autopsy. Diane's body was exhumed for a second, more targeted toxicological examination. The results came back in 6 weeks. Diane had been poisoned. The medical examiner revised her cause of death to homicide. Greg was arrested on a Tuesday morning in January, 4 months after Thanksgiving. Kevin called me as soon as he heard, and we stayed on the phone together for a long time without saying very much. Sophie was staying with Kevin and Sarah temporarily while everything was sorted out. She had her mother's dark hair and her mother's way of tilting her head when she was listening carefully, and Kevin said she had been asking for me, so I drove to Columbus the following weekend. I brought her sunflower seeds. It was too early to plant them, only January, but I explained to her that we could start them on the windowsill in little paper cups and transfer them outside when the ground was ready. She asked me if her mom had liked sunflowers, and I said her mom had loved them more than almost anything else. Sophie pressed a seed between her fingers and said, very quietly, "I think Mom knows we're okay." I did not trust my voice to answer. I just put my arm around her and we sat together at Kevin's kitchen table, planning where the sunflowers would go. Patricia cooperated fully with investigators. She was not charged with any crime, though the prosecutors made clear that could have gone differently. She has not contacted me since our phone call, and I have not reached out to her. I do not know if we will find our way back to each other. I think that is a question for a year from now, or maybe longer. Greg was charged with first-degree murder for Diane's death and attempted murder for mine. His attorney argued that the digoxin in the cabinet was for a personal heart condition he had never disclosed to his doctor, and that the insurance documents were routine planning that any financially responsible person might do. The jury took 11 hours. He was convicted on both counts. He will not be eligible for parole for 30 years. I want to be careful about how I talk about what happened, because I am a practical person, and I do not like to overstate things. I do not know with certainty what the dream was. I do not know if Diane reached across whatever boundary separates the living from the dead to put those words in my sleeping mind. I am a retired nurse. I spent my career in the realm of the measurable and the provable. But I also know this. I had nothing that would have sent me looking before that dream. I had no suspicion, no evidence, no reason to open a locked cabinet in my son-in-law's bathroom. I was tired and grieving, and I had been quietly losing ground for months, and if I had drunk that wine on Thanksgiving and sat in the warmth of my son-in-law's house feeling pleasantly sleepy, I am not sure I would have asked the questions that needed asking before it was too late. What I know is that I was standing in my own backyard in a dream, and my daughter took my hands, and her hands were warm, and she told me exactly what I needed to hear. I planted the sunflowers with Sophie in April. We put 6 of them along the south fence of Kevin's yard, in the sunniest spot we could find. By July, they were taller than Sophie, broad-faced and golden, turning toward the light the way sunflowers always do. Sophie stood next to them on a Saturday morning and spread her arms wide and laughed, and she looked so much like her mother in that moment that my chest ached and opened at the same time. Grief does not end. I want to say that plainly, because I think people are sometimes told otherwise. Diane is still gone. The hole she left in this family is still the shape of her laugh, her Sunday morning phone calls, her cardigan with the wooden buttons. Nothing that happened in the months after Thanksgiving filled that hole or made it smaller, but something changed in me. The helplessness that had settled over me like weather in the 2 years after she died, that particular gray weight of loss without direction that lifted. I had done something. I had listened when it mattered. I had paid attention in the way that she had always paid attention, the way she remembered every small thing about every person she loved. My daughter taught me that, when she was alive. She just had to remind me of it one more time. There are things I want every person watching this to carry with them. When something feels wrong, it is worth asking why. Grief can make us doubt ourselves, make us afraid to seem paranoid or difficult or disloyal. We push the uneasy feeling down because the truth it might be pointing toward is too terrible to hold. I understand that impulse. I lived inside it for 18 months. But the people who love us, the ones who are truly, completely on our side, those people want us to ask the hard questions. They want us to open the locked cabinet. They want us to trust what our hands and our gut and, yes, maybe even our dreams are telling us. I sleep better now than I have in 2 years. Not every night. Not without the occasional bad dream, or the early morning hours when I reach for my phone to text Diane something I saw and remember again that I can't. But better. Last Sunday morning, my phone rang at 9 o'clock. It was Sophie, calling from Kevin's house. She wanted to tell me that one of the sunflowers had dropped its seeds, and a new one was growing at the base, small and green and reaching upward. She said it like it was something wonderful. And she was right.